Welcome back to Who We Become Life Beyond Change. There are some stories that carry more than one lifetime in them, and today's guest is one of those people. Rhonda Payne watched her mother face breast cancer, and then she faced it herself. And in the middle of all that, while still carrying grief, still finding her footing as a survivor, she walked away from a work environment and she built something entirely her own. Rhonda is a daughter, a survivor, and an entrepreneur. And today, she's going to tell us what the storm left behind and what she found when it cleared. Rhonda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we get to the diagnosis, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about your mom. Who was she to you?
I think all girls, your mom is the one woman that you see on a constant basis and you look up to. The way she carries herself, how she goes about work. It's like you're learning the day-to-days of how you want to show up in the world. So that was my mom. I definitely, without even knowing as I reflect as a mother, you pick up so much from your mom. So she was definitely that one stronghold that your mom is that constant no matter where life takes you or what goes on and what you do. My mom was always there. Like that is my fond memories of thinking back to my childhood and all the way up until adulthood, right? Mom is your go-to person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I find myself sometimes as a mom repeating things that I swore I would never say that my mom said to my own kids. I'm like, oh my God.
It's like, did I just say go turn off the light? Like
Yes, all the time. All the time. And so, what do you remember about the time she was diagnosed? And where were you in your own life when that happened?
Yeah, so with my mom, breast cancer came back 3 times. So
Wow.
there are different points in my life that I can speak to, and I wanna call out the 3 times because you hear remission and you hear you're cancer free. And I think in my not having all of the awareness of what the diagnosis could be and could form to, I had no awareness that cancer could return. So when you hear that, you think it's final, you close the chapter. But for our family and for my mom in particular, that was not the case for her. I can say that when she was first diagnosed, it was when I was in college. So for me, I remember I remembered it and then I had an opportunity or because of distance and being away at school, I didn't have to see it on a day-to-day basis. I recognized her appearance changing. I recognized the loss of hair and all those things. But I kind of got to talk to her over the phone, so it still created some normalcy for me. When it became real and something that I did have to more so process is when it returned the second time. So if we fast forward, she was in remission for 10 years. And so now I am a young mother. And this might be 2018, 2019, and this is when it came back the second time. So I recall getting the news and having to go to HR to ask for intermittent family medical leave because I wanted to be there to take her to her chemo appointments, take her to her doctor's appointments. And so that was really when it hit me, like, okay. It's like, 'cause like when you're young, although you're in college, you still have that youth
Of
mindset.
course.
And now as an involved and many years later now a mother and seeing my mom go through this again, I'm like, okay, like this is happening. Um And I just remember saying, "How is it can I support you?" And because my mom had went through it the first time, she did share a lot of what she was going through, but she opted the second time to keep it very private. And so what that meant for me, my siblings, my father, and our spouses is that we had to be her community. We had to be her support system because she chose for that moment, that she wanted to do it privately. And so we had to respect that wish and support her in the best that we could. And then you fast forward to 2021 is when it came back. And at that point, it was very aggressive and it turned to be metastatic breast cancer. So we were not prepared for that. And we talk about different points. I was at that point in my life 6 months pregnant with my second child. So I am going through all of the emotions of, my second child coming, but also coming to terms that my mom was transitioning. So that was one of the things that really um, shook me to my core of how to show up for mom, but knowing I'm such in a fragile state, you know, and trying to know that carrying this life in me is like I have to try to take care of myself. And I remember my mom was transitioning and going into hospice and sitting by her bedside, and we were talking, and she said, "You know what you have to do." And I looked in that moment, and and so it was very clear to me, that she knew I don't know, how they say sometimes those who are transitioning, they know, they feel it. And so she used her strength that she had in that moment to tell me that only I could get my son here. And despite whatever was going to happen to her, that she needed me to stay strong because he was counting on me. And Amanda, in that moment, I'm like, "Mom, what are you talking about?" But I understood her order. Your mom's your mom. She doesn't she gave me a direct order that despite whatever was gonna happen to her, is that I was supposed to hold it together and to make sure that I was okay and that I got him there, it brought him into the world. So that gave me strength. That gave me strength during that times of grieving her, but I couldn't fall apart because I had that little one that I was counting on me to get him here. So that is what carried me during those dark days of once mom did transition of our family had that new birth in the world that we loved on. Like we poured all our love into that little one, because there was such a loss for our family.
And what a testament to a mother's love and strength to recognize that, to give you that directive of you know what you need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, and how beautiful for her to leave you with those words and give you that strength. And I want to acknowledge the strength of you and your family too for being your mom's community the second time around. And that's a conversation that we've had several times, is around the caregiver and really the untold story of the strength it takes to show up and to be that support. So what a beautiful way for you to and your family to honor your mom and and to look to the future, and in times of sorrow you have your new one to
Yeah.
pour the love into. I love that.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, we have different chapters, and then you had moved into your own diagnosis. And so, what was it like to hear that, hear your own diagnosis, knowing what you had already knew and been through with your mother's?
Yeah. You know how certain points in your life there are milestones that you're trying to reach, and Cancer, because I knew my mom was diagnosed at 37. 37 was a year that I'm like, "Oh my god, is it," you're trying to kinda you're looking over your shoulder. I was approaching myself turning 37 and saying, "This is the time around the time mom got diagnosed." Um, so eerily enough, I was also diagnosed at 37 with breast cancer. So, it kind of shook me at my core because after I, had my son, my care team said that we want to make sure that we are being very proactive. So what that would look like for you, Rhonda, is that you would be screened twice a year. And I'm like, okay, so that's doable. So in that year of turning 37, in January, I did as they instructed according to our plans, and I went and got an MRI. Everything's good. I'm like, okay, okay. Fast forward, I did genetic testing, did all the blood work, and they're like, "Well, you're higher risk, but we don't see anything that would prompt us to recommend you do any preoperative surgeries. And so you can kind of stay the course and just, continue to do your screening." So I was like, "Okay, so that's fine." But then in the summer, we're talking June or July, I found a lump. And so I'm pausing, I'm like, "Wait, what? Huh?" So it was that moment that was very eerie. I'm like, "Okay, well, let's not panic, but also let's go ahead and be proactive." So, I did call up, my care providers and share that I found a lump. That turned into what they would call a self-discovery, so that gives more precedence. I did have something already scheduled on the books, but they pushed me up, and that day was a long day. It turned into having a mammogram to having to stay and do a biopsy same day. And so, of course, you're scared. You're like, wait, what is this? And all the time, they're being the care team, they're like, you're so young. We are hoping that this is benign, but let's just do our due diligence. I'm like, okay. And if anyone knows, like, after you have those battery of tests, now is waiting. The waiting part is the hardest part because I still had to go to work. I still have to be a wife. I have to still have to be a mother. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, and I was thinking, what are, what are the results? And so, I remember this to this day. I was sitting in my office at work and I got the call and I just went numb. I went numb, and it's like you hear someone speaking, but you really can't hear anything after cancer. That's all I heard, and I'm thinking, when did this happen? Because for me, I had just had a screening in January. So for those, who are listening, and I say a testament to just being proactive and knowing your body and doing the necessary screenings because in 6 months, I was already at stage 1. So that is what really, really kinda knocked me over is how fast, the tumor grew. And in that moment, I what I did hear the radiologist share with me is that is stage 1, "Rhonda, this is treatable, but you will have to undergo, rounds of chemo and those things." And so I just after the call, I packed up my things, I left. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't speak to anybody, I didn't wanna look at anyone in the office. I was like, "I have to go." I just had to leave in that moment. And so, yeah, I went home and my husband was the first person I told, and we just kinda sat with that. We sat with that and you're thinking, "What now?" Like, that is the hardest part of first you have once you hear it, and then you hear it, but you're still in shock, and then it's the overwhelming emotions of, "What does this look like, and how our lives are gonna change?" is what I recall, um, receiving that news. Yeah, I think the hardest part is coming to the realization that there's going to be changes that you have no control over. For several months, I was constantly we are for my chemo treatment, it was weekly. So your life is not your own. So your weekly, your weekly chemo treatments followed with, I had a drop in my blood count, my white blood count. So going back to the hospital to get follow-up shots and the batany of tests that you undergo and all of the things that happen, and you don't have control. I am a person and I like to know day to day what it is that I'm doing and all those things, but surrendering control and knowing that you just have to do a thing to make sure you are okay. That's the hardest part of just realizing that some things are going to be out of your control. And then realizing, giving yourself grace. Giving yourself grace was also you remember yourself where you were able, from an energy level, from cognitive, it's like all of the things that you remember yourself at your peak. And then you are now in a state of almost you're w- I guess I want to say fragile because is
Sure.
if you understand, you're just not where you were. And it's hard to see yourself in that capacity. I'm one that it's hard to ask for help.
Yep.
And when you are fighting for your life, all you can do is get help. Like you have to. You can't not do that journey alone and having to surrender control.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to reiterate giving yourself grace and recognizing that you can't do it alone. There's so much mentally, physically, emotionally that you're going through in this type of journey. And it's hard. It's hard to reconcile the person you were before um, with who you are in that moment. But one thing that we were chatting about earlier was that sometimes going through something like this just brings you a completely different perspective. And so I'd love to hear, for everything that you've been through, what did you glean from, from going through this type of journey?
Yeah, I realized in that journey resiliency. You know, after facing the loss, losing my mother, after being diagnosed, going through the treatments, loss of hair, you realize that you're a fighter. Like the worst of the worst has happened and I'm still standing. That is what really resonated with me as the months continued on. Is like, this didn't take me out. Like, I gotta, okay, okay, I got this. Like, this is not it's not, it's not a walk in the park, but it's okay. Like you start to try to what was one thing that was really like hard and you're like, "Oh, I have to do this thing," became a, well, okay, now I'm week 10 or now I'm week 11 and I'm still like, and so you start to find your groove and what was so abnormal to you became your norm and you're starting to develop friendships with the people at the hospital because you see them all the time. You're like, the nurses, you start to know their kids, the doctors. Really becomes your extended family, and just lean into it because they're all rooting for you. And one of the things, I don't know if I shared this with you, Amanda, is some of the nurses who were my nurses were also my mother's nurses.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
it came full circle because I remember sitting when I was in there as a caregiver and now on the other side of it. So I felt like I got more love because they're like, I remember your mom. She was so sweet. So they were really kind to me, even down to they knew I liked a certain room. And so they would try their best to make sure when it was time for me to have my chemo, I could have my little room. It's like just bringing those comforts to me. So, yeah, I just look back and say, how did I do it? And somehow you dig deep and you find the strength. to kind of keep pushing forward.
Absolutely, and I think I love the word resiliency, and because you've been through 2 significant life-altering moments in your life, losing your mom, going through your own journey, and both times with your mom's directive and now with your own resilience, it really speaks to the testament that, you know, you can do hard things, and it's uncomfortable, and it's hard, and it's challenging, but now you're on the other side.
Yes.
And so with that, you've started something new. You've started you are now an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear about that journey and how you ended up, starting your own venture.
Yeah, yeah. So, when I was diagnosed, I was working and trying to balance and moving my chemo days to a day that benefited all, as I could say it. But then I took a pause because, someone advised me and said, "Hey, we have a very rich benefit. You should consider it or look into it if that is something that you would like to explore." And at that moment, I had to give up and say, "Rhonda, you don't have to do it all. Like, let's just stop, take a moment, and let's focus on one thing at a time." So I did opt to go out on a medical leave. And as someone who is used to being so busy, you have all the things going on, it was eerie to just be sitting.
Oh
Even
yeah.
though I am going through the chemo treatments, I am still trying to show up as, Rhonda, like nothing's going on with Rhonda. Um, so Amanda, in those moments of reflection and being at home, during that medical leave, you start to think about life differently. And so when I say that, I was digging deep of like, what is my purpose? What do I want to do? What does it look like when I go back to work? Is that really what I want? You're asking all of those questions. And that's what happened to me. I used those months of reflection and journaling and to really dig deep and say, what do you want? I did realize when being on a medical leave, there was something free about time, having your own time, being able to, when I felt well, to pick up my children or do dinner, do little stuff around the house, but I did it at my own pace. I did not have to carve off specific times to do those tasks. I was able to do them when I wanted to do them. And when I wanted to rest, I could rest. And so I just kind of had something just tug at me to say, what do you want to do? And from that, it birthed me wanting to branch out and to start my own business. Um, and so I kind of had it, I journaled it down and I put it on a shelf. I had it kind of, what I wanted it to be, but I didn't act on it. After my medical leave was over, I did go back to work. But if anyone knows that after you return back to work from that kind of event, a life-changing event, you're never the same.
Absolutely.
You're never the same. And I felt that in my heart. Everyone there, life went on for everyone. They were still doing projects. Nothing changed for them, but my whole world had changed. And so I was fundamentally different. Um, and so I did just kind of go through and did my best in those months following. And as that year progressed, it resulted in a layoff for me. So pausing, you're like, okay, that happened. So I use that time, now being in a layoff situation to say, Rhonda, you did a thing while you were on medical leave. You started to write down your hopes, desires, and wishes. Let's see how we can kind of make what you wrote down a reality. And so I used because it happened in the fall. So I processed. the loss of the job. Like, I think we also have to acknowledge that there's grief in that. You have expectations of wanting to do certain things and to continue to grow your career. Although I had aspirations of maybe starting, my business, it was always in my mind of one day I'll do, I think we all
Yep.
kind of tell ourselves one day, and we don't know when one day is. And so for work to abruptly no longer be, y- you know, I had to process that. So, um, from loss of friendship, career, all those things. But what I do know is I made a stance in saying, I'm going to give myself a try. I'm not going to find another job. I really want to try to bet on myself. And that's what I did.
That and there's so much richness in what you just shared, and I think going through, touching on the fact that you were fundamentally changed. Like you as an individual coming back to the workplace where things kept going on, it's hard, it can be hard to go back to that space. And then acknowledging that losing a role is also grief. Having that abrupt change of something that you have built your life around. And so, but I love the fact, and again, it goes back to your resilience that you are betting on yourself. And that is incredible. So, can you talk a little bit about your business and how people can get in touch with you, and how they can find you?
Yeah. So when I was journaling, my husband and I, Amanda, paid off over $200,000 in debt.
Wow.
And yeah, it was something that we did as a personal goal. We were very quiet about it. We're very private people. It wasn't anything that we were shouting to the rooftops. It was just something that we did and we tucked away. But when paying off that amount of debt, I said, I want to be hope and aspirations for someone else and to change their life because it was life changing. Because without that amount of debt on our shoulders, when I was diagnosed, we didn't have to worry about financial hardships. We could just focus on getting me better. So that was really important to me. So, in fast forwarding to building the business out, I positioned myself to be a debt management advisor. So helping those get through and really what's scary is coming to terms with their financial landscape. Having the tough questions of is it just, you don't have enough income, or is it based on behavioral decisions that you have done that have gotten you into a sticky situation? Um, and what I like to say is I approach conversations with empathy because I know what it's like to have debt hanging over you. I want to lend myself for support. And that is how I always wanted to position my business of it's not about the spreadsheets. It's not, anyone can tell you, hey, you need to cut this, this, and this. And you're like, but wait, but wait, I want to live. And it's true. I truly believe that you can get out of debt and still live. And that's the philosophy that I want to instill when I'm working with clients is as first, we're people first. It matters what your goals are. It matters how you want to approach it because it's your story. And it's not one size fits all. And I
Absolutely.
recognize that in everyone's journey.
And so what has entrepreneurship taught you about yourself?
Oh, is I was not prepared for the volume of interactions and just being vulnerable, putting yourself out there in spaces, meeting new people, being able to share your story and your why. And so in this season, I'm having to be so vulnerable. They want to meet you for coffee. I was so selective with what I told and who I told. But I can say in the beauty of when I did decide to fully share this is my story, I was so surprised. Everyone was like, "Yeah." People were ready to take action. So when you start to speak up and share your truth and what it is that you need, you are gonna be blown away by the level of support and how people are willing and wanting to support you in any kind of way. So that was true on my journey through cancer, and that has also been true with entrepreneurship. When I'm speaking up and sharing it is my struggles or who I'm trying to talk to, I have always been met with, let me connect you with this person, or let me tell you about this. And so that is how has is continued to help me put one foot in front of the other and saying, yes, this is new. Yes, this is scary, but you can get through it because you have community.
I love that. And vulnerability and resilience, I think, have been two themes throughout your different chapters. And
Right.
so, Rhonda, as we close, for anyone listening who is interested in learning more or connecting with you, and we'll include all of this in our show notes, but how can they find you? How can they get in touch?
Yeah. Okay, well, on my website, I do have a website, is achievefreedomtoday.com. So that's where you can kind of get a little bit, to learn a little bit more about me, the services that I do offer. And I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me there at Rhonda Payne. Um, and don't be afraid to send me a message. I would love to hear your journey, whether you are a survivor of cancer, going through cancer, you're an entrepreneur, like whatever it is, and however you want to show up, or you are in debt and wanting to kind of talk about it. I want to be that person. I really want to show up and give people a safe space.
I love that. Well, Rhonda, thank you so much. We there throughout your journey, um, different words have come up: daughter, survivor, entrepreneur. And each of those words contain a whole world. And you've lived inside all of them, sometimes all at once. And so, for everyone listening, what I hope you take from this conversation is something Rhonda showed us today without ever saying it directly. You're allowed to grieve and build at the same time. You're allowed to leave what no longer serves you, even when timing feels impossible. And you're allowed to become someone your past self couldn't have imagined. So, Rhonda, thank you for your honesty, your tenderness, and for carrying your mother's memory into everything you do. And to everyone listening, whatever storm you're standing in right now, there is something waiting for you on the other side of it. So, until next time, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep becoming who you're meant to be.